Hey sisters, welcome back to my channel. My name is Neiima. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another video of mine. Here on this channel, I bring you everything luxury from makeup to fragrance to lifestyle. If any of those things pique your interest, please consider subscribing down below. Hey sisters, so today I will be doing a complexion focused video. I will be going through each step and giving you all of my tips and tricks on how I get a flawless, seamless base. What I used on my eyes as well as my lips will be down in the description below. Without further ado, let's jump right in. One of the most frequently asked questions that I see posted online in beauty spaces: is primer necessary? Is it a required step in your makeup routine? I do not think products that are specifically marketed to be primers are necessary. I think they are optional, but I do think skin prep is essential. You have to prep the skin for makeup. So before I start applying anything, I'm going to show you ladies what I already have on my skin. The very first thing that I did was use two of the LMS Dynamic Resurfacing Facial Pads. These are marketed as skin refining pads. I like to rotate these out because they do have lactic acid, and I'll use them like every other day or so, and they are really good to use before makeup. These pads actually do help with texture. I have noticed a huge difference along the sides of my nose and also on my nose, and I've been using them to treat breakouts that are on my forehead. I always suggest some sort of eye cream, eye serum. You can even use like the patches. I went in with the Innisfree green tea caffeine bright eye serum for my under eyes. It's going to be imperative if you like to wear concealer under the eyes that your under eye is hydrated. Always suggest an eye cream, especially if you have dry under eyes. And then of course I use a moisturizer. Today I use the one from Kohl. This is their Vino Hydra cream. This is their deep hydration version. They also have a gel version of this, and then they have a light version, which is in a light pink bottle, just like this. And then of course an SPF. I am filming pretty late in the day, but I'll always go in with an SPF, and this one is my favorites. I've talked about this before. This is from the Inky List, and it is their polyglutamatic acid dewy sunscreen. It is SPF 30. So I personally do like to use a pore filling mattifying primer just along the sides of my nose. As you guys can see, I'm getting kind of glossy in that area. So I'm going to be using the e.l.f. Power Grip Matte Primer. If you have dry skin, you have to go in with moisture and prep your skin beforehand. And that can be with your favorite hydrating primer or with a few steps of skincare like I showed you guys. If you are oily or you have large pores, I do recommend priming. And I think a lot of us may feel like primers are not essential because a lot of brands have released very gimmicky primers. They have released primers that do not work, and I noticed they specifically do this with pore filling primers or mattifying primers. So they're always trying to get the girlies who have oily skin or who have large pores with the gimmicky primers. So I get it. I fell victim to that, especially when I was first starting in makeup. I am a little bit extra with my base routine, but again, this is just how I like to apply my base products. But I do like to go in at this point before I put any sort of makeup product on my face with preferably hyaluronic acid in a spray form. This one is from ColourPop. This is their Pretty Fresh Hyaluronic Acid Setting Mist. And the reason I like to go in with some hyaluronic acid, it does help to softly fill the pores. You want your skin to be hydrated even if you have oily or oily combination skin. My biggest suggestion to ladies who have concerns about hyperpigmentation or just coverage in general is going in and color correcting at this point. I like to use concealers that are a little bit richer than my skin tone and that have a slightly red or warm undertone. It provides those color correcting properties that I'm looking for without me having to use an orange corrector. And that is why I always recommend having skin tone shades to shades that are a little bit richer. To me, they're a little bit more flexible. I can use a shade like this to clean up my brows, to color correct. Whereas if you buy a lot of like orange color correctors, reds, you pretty much can only use them for color correcting, and that's fine, that's their purpose. But I just find you get more bang for your buck when you purchase concealers that are a little bit richer, because you can use them for more things than a color corrector. I like to use the NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealers. It is the shade Truffle, and this is what it looks like. I always recommend a short-haired dense brush. This one is from Morphe. It is their M173 brush. I pretty much take this anywhere I have hyperpigmentation. And how I recommend you apply your color corrector is just going in, tapping a few times very lightly, the cap to evenly distribute it. Aside from the shade, you also want to be cognizant of the consistency of a particular product. When looking for a color corrector, you want to go for something that is creamy and has a little bit of weight to it over something like a serum concealer. You also don't want to use something that is extremely matte or that dries fast. We do need time to blend this out. For foundation, I'm going to be using the NARS Light Reflecting Foundation, and this is the shade Macao. When blending out your foundation, whether you like to use a brush or a sponge, always make sure you tap like you see me doing here. Do not drag the product across your face. You run the risk of it looking streaky and patchy. I'll be using the Hourglass Vanish Concealer. This is the shade Maple. I believe I've mentioned this technique before. I got this technique from Robert here on YouTube. His name is Robert Welsh, and he is a longtime professional makeup artist. I think he's based out of the UK. And he talked about how to apply concealer in the most flattering way. Using too much product can be very, very unflattering, especially if you have mature skin or dry under eyes. You don't need to make a full triangle under the eye. You also don't need to bring the concealer all the way down to your nose. And you don't need to fill in this area here. Just by way of blending out your product, you will be able to conceal this area. Remove some of the excess products from the wand, because even though these wand applicators, they are considered doe foot applicators, this is pretty much a sponge, and sponges soak up things. There is a ton of product in these wands, and brands even design their doe foots where they have like these little hollows where product can sit in there, so you're literally scooping out the product in these hollows. This step, I do like to go in again, more of the hyaluronic spray. I have never met one woman who said she wanted her face to look wider with all of her products applied. That is why you want to do away with the 2016 full triangle under the eye. You apply way too much product and you bring the concealer down way too far, and it makes your face look fuller. If you want a more cat eye effect while still brightening, I suggest this technique. I also suggest that you allow your concealer to dry for about 60 seconds or so, just so you get the full coverage of the product. And blend out any harsh lines. If you don't want to dirty up another makeup tool, you can go in with your foundation brush. You want your foundation, your concealer. In a second, I'm gonna go in with bronzer. You want all of that to mesh together as one, even though it's 3 different tones. The concealer being the lightest, the foundation obviously like being the middle ground, and then your bronzer being the richest. So you're trying to blend 3 different tones together. Now I'm going to go in with this beautiful shade of blush from Chanel. This is their Le Beige Water Fresh Blush. This is the shade Deep Apricot. If you are a beginner in makeup and you're still getting comfortable kind of playing with different textures and products, my general rule for cheek products in general is apply liquids on top of liquids, creams on top of creams, powders on top of powders. Notice I went in with this liquid blush on top of my unset concealer. As of late, I have been loving a cream bronzer, and I'm gonna use this one from Rose Inc. It's just called Cream Bronzer, and it's in the shade Capri. How I like to apply my cream formulas is I will just use the exact same brush that I use for foundation, and I just tap into the cap to make sure it's evenly distributed. When you apply your bronzer, always apply it a little bit higher up to give yourself a more lifted look. Also, make sure the tones that you are using on your cheeks are complementary. Notice I use 2 warm tone products. Do not mix warm and cool tone because you run the risk of it turning muddy. So I'm going to show you my powdering technique, which really is nothing exciting, of how I keep my T-zone matte throughout the day. And my best advice to you, you want to use a setting powder that is very, very finely milled, and that's going to give you some additional coverage as well. You want it to be 100% matte. So none of the hydrating setting powders, none of the like glowy setting powders. Powder that I'm using today, and it is the one from Makeup by Mario, the Surreal Blurring or Soft Blur loose setting powder, and I have the shade Warm Honey, and I like to put a little bit onto the cap, and I go in with a triangle puff, making sure the powder is evenly spread out on the puff, and just go right in and set. You want to set product, not creases. Always go in and reblend your concealer before applying setting powder. Also, use a setting powder that has a little bit of color in it, whether it is a banana powder, a peachy tone powder, just to prevent flashback. I've noticed a lot of translucent powders have that flashback issue. And then once I have my under eyes set with the first layer, I like to go in ever so slightly just to bake, and I'm using the tiniest amount of powder. Baking has a few intents and purposes. Firstly, it adds an extra layer of protection when you have oily skin to prevent your oils from peeking throughout the day. And when using a quality setting powder, it adds extra coverage and blurring properties to the under eye to kind of cancel out your pores and give you a very seamless and flawless look. The biggest tip I have for you ladies, aside from using quality products, that doesn't mean expensive, it just means quality, is to blend. Layer your blending. You can see here after I went in with setting powder, I used my bronzing brush, no extra product, and my blush brush to make sure everything is blended together. For my oily girlies, go in with a pressed powder. This one is from Sephora, and this is their Micro Smooth Multitasking Baked Face Powder. And this is the shade 60 Ebony, with a very, very light hand, just to mesh everything together so that my foundation is not too glowy. But if you're like me and you do want a little more hydration on the skin, but you do produce some oil throughout the day, this is a fantastic step to make sure you can kind of get the best of both worlds. Powders that don't look like powder on the skin are going to be your absolute best friend when it comes to makeup application and wear time. I love this one from Sephora. I also really like the MAC Mineralized Skin Finish. If you're like me and you wear prescription glasses or you like to wear sunglasses, these are great to have in your bag because, as we know, we can get that line of demarcation and they are perfect for touch-ups. I recommend that you keep 2 kinds of sprays in your rotation. The first being a mattifying or either a makeup extending setting spray, showing you my 2 favorites here. I also recommend that you have what I call a pull together spray. This spray is not so much for setting or mattifying the skin. This is strictly to hydrate and make the makeup look like skin. I go in first with the One Size On Till Dawn. This is going to keep my makeup in place and offer me a soft matte finish. I then go in with the brush that I use for my pressed powder, no extra product, and press that spray into the skin. Then I go over top with my pull together and then just look at how skin-like my makeup looks. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions for me, leave it down below, and I will catch up with you ladies very, very soon. Bye, sisters.